Hello and welcome to another Magic the Gathering video. So similar to what I did with the last set's Fat Pack, which the previous one I would have opened would have been the 2014 core set, I'm going to just go through the sort of process of building a deck from just the content of the Fat Pack. Again, and I mentioned this last time, with 9 boosters at your disposal, you do have the opportunity to, instead of building a 40 card deck, which you would normally is the size of deck that you would build with six boosters when you're doing sort of Magic sealed. With 9 you could build a 60 card deck, but there is an argument to be said, and this is what I've done here, is I'm going to stick to building a 40 card deck. There's a couple of reasons. One reason is that if I'm sticking to what I've got within the Fat Pack, it's quite possible that I wouldn't necessarily have enough mana to build a monocolour 60 card deck. That's a possibility. The other thing is, by only building a 40 card deck with a bigger card pool, is that I'm going to get more duplicates of commons, I'm going to get more utility because of that, and I'm going to get a better tuned deck. And again, it gives me the opportunity to go down the much more likely to be able to go down the monocoloured route, which is not always the case when you're building 40 card decks from a six booster pack pool. That's my sort of logic with sticking with this. So in front of me are all of the cards except for the land, except for the basic land, which were in the boosters that I opened when it was yesterday. So firstly, there's a few things I need to take out. So I'm just going to take out the land that was pulled from those boosters. In addition, obviously, the tokens and just the advert cards. So I'll put them to one side. Also, I pulled out some of the cards that I would either consider to be sideboard cards, or there's something about them which would require me to play cards in other colours because of what I've pulled here. There's also cards in here which require me to play other colours, but not necessarily cards from other colours. So anything where I felt that I needed to play a card or cards from another colour, it ended up in this sort of pack with all the potential sideboards. Plus there's a few cards in here that I would deem unplayable. A good example of a card where I would need another card really for this to work well is there is a red card here, Two-Headed Cerberus, which has double strike. Now that would work really nice with an enchantment on it, but I couldn't really see anything, or there wasn't enough of anything in red that would work well with this card, at least on first examination. So if I did end up playing a combination of red and some other colour which maybe had something that I could enchant on this that would boost its toughness, sorry, its power, so the double strike would become much more effective, because you know we've got a 1 and 2 red for a 1/2 with double strike. It's going to hit twice, but it's only 2 hits of 1. But if I found something like that, then I would definitely think about reintroducing this back in. What else was there? Well, there was a very high cost red here, which had only dealt 5 damage. Useful because you can split it amongst any number of target creatures and or players. But again, something that I could sideboard back in if I felt it was useful, but I felt it was a bit too high a cost. And then we got a bit of land destruction again. This would only be ever good against someone else that was playing red, that was playing mountains. So that went out. And a few other things. I think there was a card here, you know, particularly against flyers. Now you could argue if we had a set that was heavy in flyers, you may want to main deck that anyway, and then take it out if your opponent didn't have flyers. So you can sort of do the reverse of things. You can put in cards that maybe aren't effective all the time and then just take them out if your opponent isn't playing those cards, or vice versa. You can put it in the sideboard, and then if you happen to play a deck where that card would be useful, bring it in. You just have to weigh it up. So what we're left with is cards that I would like to play in their colours. Now, some of them are more playable than others, but what I'm going to try and do is sort of narrow it down. There's also a few at the top which aren't applicable, but I just wanted to show you them because particularly with the colourless cards, they could be played in any colour. So also what I'll try and do is illustrate a few points to do with just creature evaluation and sort of benchmarking as well. So let's just look along the top first of all, and particularly here at the artifacts. So we've got some colourless cards here which would work in any colour. So my first thought is, as they're playable in any colour, is there any in here that I probably wouldn't think about playing? I find that the flame cost wheel, it's only one colourless to cast, but the activation of what it does, which is 5 colourless, then you tap and sack it, so you're going to lose the card. It only actually does 3 damage. So the only time that would be useful to me is if I was playing, and you can only do damage against the target creature. So I can use it as removal for any creature which has 3 toughness or less. So there's a lot of mana to expend for that. So I'd have to be really struggling with creature removal in my pool to actually think about playing that. But because it's colourless, I could play it in any colour. So if I did end up playing a colour that was weak on creature removal, I could play that at a pinch as my so-called 23rd card. So I'm going to put that to one side. Fleet Feather Sandals, I think that's going to be useful to me. 2 colourless. Equip it, gives a creature flying and haste. Costs 2 to equip. But there are it would be rather nice to have a number of these large creatures, give them evasion. So definitely one that I could play in a lot of colours here. And as we start to go through these colours, you'll see what I've got, what creatures I have. Traveller's Amulet. So for 1 colourless, I play it, and then for 1 colourless, I can activate it. I have to sacrifice it again, and search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So that's going to give me tutoring for land, and again it's basic land, where I'm running 2 or more colours. And then I've got this dual land here, Temple of Deceit. So it does enter the battlefield tapped, so it's going to slow things down. It does have scry in it, and it's taps for blue or black mana. So if I'm playing a blue-black deck and I'm looking for some mana fixing, very useful. So there's that. And then moving over to these, I thought I'd highlight the only 2 multicoloureds I've got. So if I happen to find myself wanting to play blue-black, I have Shipwreck Singer here. So I'm playing blue-black, converted mana cost there would be 2, and I'm getting for that a 1/2. And this is where I want to start talking about like mana curves and benchmarking of creatures. You might have heard, if you've played a bit of Magic, people often to refer as the vanilla test, or vanilla creatures, or there's things like French vanilla, virtual vanilla. So I'm going to just try and explain as simply as I can what all this means, and also the importance of really understanding what the terminology means, and also refining terminology yourself as you find better ways of doing things. All of these little key buzzwords and things are just shortcuts, basically, to save you having to reevaluate cards every single time you do a deck build, but also remembering that every time a new set comes out or you get a new piece of information is refining those shortcuts, because there's nothing worse than being stuck with a shortcut that doesn't actually do what it's supposed to. And one useful exercise you can do, which will help you try and get your head around the whole vanilla creature concept, is to actually you can actually go through using the gatherer and pull down for all the various casting costs vanilla creatures. And a vanilla creature is basically any creature that doesn't have an ability. The only text that it's ever going to have in the text box is flavor text. There is no ability in there. So an example of I'm just trying to see if we have one here. There was a vanilla creature, or there's a few in the set. Let me just dig one out. Oh, here we go. So this is an example of a vanilla creature. So here we have a Nessian Corsair, which is a 3/3 for 2 and a green. So we're paying a converted mana cost of 3, 2 and a green, for a 3/3. So that's, you know, on curve, as they might say. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about this relationship between the mana cost and the power and toughness in a moment, because there's several misconceptions often that come about as a result of misunderstanding about benchmarking and how important it is that you actually try and benchmark creatures. So there's an example of a vanilla creature. So for a lot of people, I think they've got into the frame of mind that when people talk about vanilla creatures and talking about whether a creature is good or bad, they tend to think, oh yeah, well, I know that, you know, 1 for 1, 2 for 2, 3 for 3, 4 for 4, 5 for 5, and so on. If I get one of those creatures, that's my benchmark. Now the trouble is, it's not as simple as that. And anybody that's gone through the gatherer, like I said, and start to look at vanilla creatures as a benchmark, because that's a good place to start, because then you can go and you can start looking at, you know, when you start adding abilities to creatures, what's that worth? What am I losing? What am I gaining? Am I seeing an increase in the converted mana cost when I add something like flying to, say, a 2/2? Or am I seeing one aspect of the power or the toughness being reduced when I add flying and keeping the mana cost the same? So what I did a few weeks ago, and this was before Theros came out, is I went through and I looked at all the vanilla creatures that have ever been printed, using the gatherer to do some searches, and worked out for each point on mana, and you'll see my nice Winnie the Pooh notepad here, and here's my little set of notes here. You know, what you got. So on average, for one drop or one converted mana cost creatures, you got a 1/2. And again, remember, these are averages. So the creatures that were there could have ranged from anything from, I think, a 2/2 down to a 0, I think a 0/4, and you know, all sorts of flavors in between, really. But when you averaged it out, the power and toughness, the average was a 1/2. Now the big problem with 1-drop, particularly vanilla creatures where they don't have any ability on them, is that once you play them, they become obsolete very quickly because bigger creatures come out. So really with a 1/1, you are looking for something that either in simplest forms is able to trade up in some way. And what I mean by that is, you know, say it was a 2/1, then it could take on a 2/2 and it would destroy the 2/2 and obviously itself. Or it has another ability which gives you stuff beyond the first couple of turns. So it might have, you know, a mana ability on it, or it might have an ability to tap down creatures, which could be useful. As you move through the curve, you start to see an interesting pattern emerge. Instead of you getting what you think you'd get, which is, like I said, two for two and three for three on as the average creature, it doesn't work out like that. Yes, when you look at 2 drops, you get 2 twos. On average, a 3 casting cost creature, a 3 casting cost vanilla creature, is a 2/3. A 4 is a 3/3. A 5 is a 4/4. A 6 is a 5/5. A 7 is a 6/6. And at 8, there is only one vanilla creature ever been printed in Magic when I did this. And that was Scaled Worm, and that's a 7/6. So what's interesting is as you get higher up the mana curve, the power and toughness you get with vanilla creatures actually falls off slightly. So what I'm getting at is you would be rather disappointed trying to look for a 5/5 for 5 vanilla because there's not that many of them. So yeah, just be mindful with the vanilla creatures. That's what there is. Now, saying that, of course, once you've done that, you could then go on and look at all the creatures, including those with abilities, and find out what the averages are there. But also to assist you with this, over time, people have come up with various other benchmarks where they just use a generic creature term to describe a certain combination of casting cost and power toughness. So a 2/2 for 2 is referred to as a grizzly bear. A 2/2 for 3 is referred to a grey ogre, or referred to as a grey ogre. A 3/3 for 4 is a hill giant. And again, there are other terms that you could come up with, or other terms that people use, which would describe certain sort of benchmark archetype creatures, or benchmark creatures. So all I'm saying is just be careful that you've got your understanding right about what to expect for a creature at a certain casting cost. The other thing about any pull where you're pulling them from boosters is the vast majority of stuff you're going to see is commons. So again, remember, you may find that your expectations will be diluted down because you won't be seeing all these, unless you're lucky like I was here, you won't be seeing all those sort of bombs where they're way above the curve and they have this super ability. So again, prepare to be, to a certain degree, disappointed. So just going back to some of these, let's have a look at another example here. We've got something with an ability on it. So let's have a look at our Shipwreck Singer. So this is something that I would play if I was going to, or think about playing if I was playing blue-black. So we're 2 colourless for a 1/2. As I said, if you average out all the vanilla creatures, if it's a vanilla creature, you would expect to get a 2/2 for 2 casting cost here. Also with the blue-black, it's slightly trickier to cast, or can be. But we get some abilities. We get flying. So if this just had flying on it, one of your interpretations might be, well, for the flying, I sort of lost 1 power. That's one way of looking at it. But we get some reusable abilities. So we have here a 2 casting cost creature, which is going to give us stuff beyond when we cast it. So hopefully it won't become obsolete within a couple of turns. So what are those abilities? Well, for 1 and a blue, a target creature an opponent controls attacks this turn if able. So you're basically goading a creature, I suppose. There's a card in green called Lure, which forces your opponent to attack a creature. And the other interesting thing you can do with the Gatherer is, of course, you can look up and see if there's a card that just does this in blue, and what does it cost, and find out whether that's a fair cost for that ability. And then, well, for 1 and a black, now the one and a blue, we don't have to tap the card. So that means we can do other things with this card, which we wouldn't be able to do if being tapped restricted us from doing that. However, the 1 and the black, we do need to tap it, and attacking creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. So that's great if you're on the receiving end of an attack, and it will give all the attackers that are attacking you -1/-1. So useful ability. and obviously enhances things beyond just the fact that it's a 1-2 for blue and a black. Then we get Battle-Wise Hoplite. So this is a 2-2 for 1 and a blue, and if we didn't see the ability, we'd think, oh, this is a bear, or a benchmark here. It's like a bear. It also has heroic on it. So whenever you cast a spell that targets Battle-Wise Hoplite, put a +1/+1 counter on Battle-Wise Hoplite, and then you get to scry 1. So you look at the top of your card of your library, and then you may put that card on the bottom. So we can target this with stuff to put 1/1 counters on. And what's great about this is that when we target it, that stays, that +1/+1 stays because it's a counter. So we could target that with Battle-Wise Valor, for instance. It would give the creature also +2/+2 until end of turn, in addition to the +1/+1 counter that we're putting on it. So at end of turn, the 2/2 would go, but the counter would stay. But we also get to scry with this as well on there. If we were short of doing anything constructive, and we just wanted to activate the heroic on there, and maybe we had, say, let's have a look what we got here, a Spark Jolt that we had spare, and it was just clogging our hand up, say, and we just wanted to do something useful with it. Maybe there were no 1 toughness creatures that we could deal with. We could actually target our own Battle-Wise Hoplite, and that would actually trigger heroic. Now whether that would be an effective use of that Spark Jolt is another matter, but you can do that. You can, and that's something else you need to watch out for, is that you could target your creatures, your heroic creatures, with certain spells which you maybe have been wanting to save to use on your opponent, and then they become obsolete, but because of the way they are, they wouldn't actually kill the creature, your own creature you're targeting, but it would trigger the heroic on there. So there's basically 2 coloured cards that you can. It's interesting to just go through, and if you're doing this, obviously we're not doing this against the clock, so we can afford to sit here and just talk about that. But what that would then do is it would give you possibly a shortcut to then use quickly when you did have to use under sort of time pressure. So the rest of these, what I've organised them by, is basically creatures here with the best creatures at the top, followed by because I just wanted to highlight some of the commons, because again we're playing a format where commons do matter when you're trying to build from boot directly from boosters with a limited card pool, because there's much more commons in it than everything else, and to a certain degree uncommons, but commons are king in this format. Well, apart from obviously in this case when we've got some amazing bombs, but commons are much more important, I feel, in limited formats than in a lot of other formats. Although remember, commons always do give you utility, and that's not to say commons themselves aren't powerful. It's just what they can do increases in a format where you have a much higher percentage of commons than the other cards. So let me just find my spots here. So down here we've got our instance, and again, and also basically all the non-creature stuff. What I've also done is again, on some where there wasn't necessarily a bomb at the top, I've brought to the top again some key commons that I think are important. So what I'm going to do is go through the stuff that I would be least likely to play, and then work up to a position where I'm stuff I'm going to play. The stuff I had the biggest problem, I felt, was with the blue-black, and although there's some very strong cards in here, certainly it worked out that neither of these I had enough cards to play mono colour, so I couldn't play mono black, I couldn't play mono blue. Also, the problem I tended to have In limited, one of the things that tends to happen early on, and the easiest thing to do, is to go for heavy creature-based decks, and just basically, beat your opponent down. And also in a set where enchantments matter, attaching things to creatures, it obviously makes sense to try and have decks where you're going to have enough creatures to be able to put your enchantments on, or whatever, to put those enchantment creatures as well. And what happened with black was I didn't feel that I really had enough creatures. I had some strong stuff like Grey Merchant of Asphodel, which really benefits me because it's got devotion to black, and so would be fantastic in a mono black deck. But there just wasn't enough creatures in here to also match up well with some of my other stuff in here. So I actually had 4 Scourge Marks, but I felt that there was too many of those in relation to my creatures, and okay, I could reduce them, but again I'd be back to a similar problem. I had some nifty instance here. I've got Ferric's Curse, so it deals 2 damage to target creature and you gain 2 life. I had Lash of the Whip, so target creature gets -4/-4 until end of turn. That was 4 in a black. And I had Sip of Hemlock, which is pretty expensive, 4 colourless, 2 black, but it does destroy target creature and its controller loses 2 life. And then we had various other instants, and finally a sorcery there, which returns up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. So lots of really useful ways of basically interacting with my opponent in black. But I felt black overall as a colour, certainly I really wanted to, if I could, play mono black with the other cards, but there just wasn't enough black to do that. I could play black blue, but then I ran into another sort of problem with blue, is that it didn't have anything super strong. I mean, it had some nice commons like Vaporkin, Nimbus Naiad, and the Precedent Chimera, which is for 3 and 2 blue. You get a 3/4 with flying, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get to scry. I had Melita's Charlatan, which has a tricky ability on it. So for 2 and a blue, you tap it. The controller of target instant or sorcery spell copies it. That player may choose new targets for your copy. So there was lots of some nifty interactions, but there would have to be an awful lot of thought in getting this. And then higher up the curve, I had some useful things like Benelix Giant, 5 and a blue for a 4/5 with hexproof. So I could see myself attaching enchantments to that, and then doing a few other crazy things. But nothing that really made it easy for me to play blue. I suppose that's what I'm saying. And again, there were some good support cards in blue. We had Griptide, so there's some nice bounce stuff. So to put target creature on top of owner's library, returning target creature to his owner's hand, and scrying. A null, obviously, to counter artifacts or enchantment, good in an enchantment heavy deck or enchantment heavy set. And again, some useful support cards. But again, I found that it complicated things and didn't make the deck necessarily, or the deck that I could have built, easy to play. A lot of thought going on. So I basically put blue and black to one side, which also meant, because of that, I would put that to one side. Now, that's not to say that there might be certain blue cards I would want to splash, or maybe I would want to go for blue-white. That will be a possibility. But as I looked through these cards and sorted them, it became apparent that I was definitely leaning towards a particular strategy. So I didn't really feel that white-blue was an option. And I must admit, when I'm tending to play white-blue, I tend to go down the sort of blue-white skies route. And I felt that within this there was some white support cards which I felt just didn't work. you know, they've got a very defensive enchantment here, and something which is more of a control would be more use in a control deck. So I thought the white-blue wouldn't really work. Now, as you saw when I made my pulls originally, we got some pretty obscene stuff in white, red and green. So one, I suppose, a no-brainer, although you could get severely colour screwed, is to play white, red, green good stuff. So what I would probably be tempted to do is ditch, you know, keep, you know, so the support cards I would probably keep would be this one, white instant, some red burn that I'd need to sort through, and so let's have a look at some green support. I've got some card draw. I've got, oh yeah, artifact destruction, and so in effect, what I was thinking is in a set where there was heavy enchantment, it may pay me to main deck my enchantment destruction and then remove it if I didn't need it. But in a 3-coloured deck where I've got some, you know, really strong creatures, some of the deck thing I might have to do, some of that may end up getting sideboarded. Now, out of the 3 colours, the one with the 2 mythics was red. So really we have at the moment there's several things we could do. I could do red green, white red green, red white, green white. If I was just looking at you know, dual colours, like I would normally do if I was building from 6 boosters, normally I'd end up with at least a 2-colour deck. So just let's go through some of the colours here so we can just get a feel for maybe what's going on. So we've got our Heliod, God of the Sun, you know, obviously very strong mythics, indestructible, 5/6 for 3 and a white. As long as your devotion to white is less than 5, Heliod isn't a creature. So this is where with some of these devotion comes into play. So obviously that's making you want to play a mono-colour deck, and so therefore the ability to trigger the devotion is going to be tricky when you're playing multiple colours. 100-handed one, another very strong card. And then I had 3 observant Alciad. So again, I was looking at, you know, what commons have I got multiple copies of, because I'm more likely to get that with commons. And this has bestow on it. Okay, it's a 2/2 for 2 and a white, but it has vigilance, and of course it's bestow of 4 and a white, bestows on the enchanted creature +2/+2 and vigilance. And then other cards like Phalanx Leader has heroic on it. So I'd have to target this with something. Couldn't do the target with the one burn spell, 1 damage burn spell, because it would obviously kill it, so that trick wouldn't work. And then things like Heliod's Emissary, Aphira's Warden. I can use this to tap down creatures with power 3 or less. So again, I'd have to consider, you know, how likely am I going to come across creatures that fit into that category on the turn this comes into play. And then we've got Setian Griffin. Again, this would be more at home in a green-white build if I was doing that on there. So, seeing as I wouldn't be playing a more of a controlling passive build here, I'm just going to remove those. So that leaves me with 1 support card to contribute from white there. Moving to green, I've got Polychronus World Eater with its monstrosity on it. I've got some handy mana generation here. Oh no, sorry, I'm going in the wrong order here. I've got Leaf Crown Dryad, which has bestow on it, which it gives +2/+2 and has reach. And this is actually a 2/2 for 1 and a green if you just cast it normally rather than bestow it on something. Agent of Horizons it can't be blocked, but you have to play blue to that, so that would be more at home in a green-blue deck. That would be good in green red, which I could do. So there would be some things I would have to cut in here and take out. I've got mana acceleration here, Karamitras, and then I've got Staunch Archered Warrior. So I've got another thing with Heroic here. It's a 2/2. So again, I could cheat with it and trigger that if I wanted to, if there was no other way of triggering it using my 1 damage burn spell. Nemesis of Mortals, and then Vulpine Goliath. So they're also in these stacks. I've tended to have stuff gets bigger as you go down in there. So there's all, really strong cards, and I could play multiple things. But as I sorted these cards, one thing that became very apparent to me was that how much red I had. And so because of that, it gave me the opportunity to do something which you wouldn't get often within a within a 6 booster pack build, and that's to build a mono color deck. And that would be, I think, my choice in this would be to actually make the most of this and to build a mono red deck. So what do I have here? Well, I have Perforus, God of the Forge, and let me just focus in on this a bit better so we can talk a bit about this. So this has Indestructible, 6/5. Obviously it's a legendary enchantment creature god. As long as your devotion to red is less than 5, Perforus isn't a creature. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Perforus deals 2 damage to each opponent. 2 in a red. Creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So I definitely want to be playing this. And in a mono red deck, you can see why that's important. So with these definitely the ones, the stuff that I pulled is pulling me towards that. So for me, it would either I would have either played mono red or mono white to really make the most of this, or one of the colours and then splashing something of the small amounts of others. Stormbreath Dragon, flying haste protection from white, 4/4 for 3 and 2 red. It's got monstrosity 3 on it for 5 and 2 red. And when Stormbreath Dragon becomes monstrous, it deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of cards in that player's hand. Not always so good, because by the time you play this and then activate its monstrosity, possibly your opponent's not going to have many cards in their hand, but it just depends on what sort of deck you're playing against. And then I've got 3, again I've just brought some of the commons to the front. I actually got 4 copies of Ill-Tempered Cyclops, which is a 3/3 for 3 in a red with monstrosity 3 on it. So I get to put 3 +1/+1 counters on it. It's the same with that one as well, actually. And it has trample on it. And I actually had 4 copies of that, which would make this deck, that would be very consistent. And that was another thing that attracted me to red. And there was a lot of multiple copies of very usable creatures in here. 1 in a red 2/1 with trample. 3 of those. Minotaur Skullcleaver, 2 in a red 2/2 haste. When Minotaur Skullcleaver enters the battlefield, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Fanatic of Mogis, 2 of those. So with this, it's a 4/2 for 3 and a 4. So 4/2 for 4. When Fanatic of Mogis enters the battlefield, it deals damage to each opponent equal to your devotion to red. So I'm playing mono red. Ember Swallower, 2 and 2 red for a 4/5, so 4 for a 4/5. 5 and 2 red is its monstrosity 3, so you get 3 1/1 counters if you make it monstrous. And when Ember Swallow becomes monstrous, each player sacrifices 3 lands. So you'd have to be strategic in the playing of this, because it's each player, including yourself. So you'd have to make sure you'd have plenty of, and also you wouldn't want it affecting your devotion as well. So I'm just going to put that to one side because it's something I wanted to just talk about. Borderland Minotaur, 2 of those, and that's just a vanilla 4/3 for 2 and a red, 2 and 2 red. Stone Shock Giant, again 2 copies of these. 3 and 2 red, 6 red monstrosity 3. When Stone Shock Giant becomes monstrous, creatures without flying your opponent's control can't block this turn. And then we move on to our direct damage stuff. We've got Lightning Strike, so this gets 3 damage to target creature or player for 1 and a red. Rage of Perforus, 4 and a red for 4 damage to target creature, and it can't be regenerated, and you get to scry. 2 of the Spark Jolts, so they're just little 1 damage instants to target creature or player, but as I've said, you know, there's a possibility, and I don't know if any of these had, I didn't see it, but you could trigger heroic on something. Although again with these, if my opponent wasn't playing any 1 toughness creatures that needed to be dealt with, these would get sideboarded out in instead of some other red card that I'd temporarily put to one side earlier. Magma Jet deals 2 damage to target creature or player and scry for 2 for 1 and a red, and then Coordinated Assault, up to 2 target creatures each get +1/+0 and gain first strike until end of turn. So what I've got here essentially is a pretty aggressive red deck. The Ember Swallower, what I would probably do is, because of the number of cards I've got here, I've actually got, I think, 23 including that. So that would be my 23rd card instead of that. And then obviously all I do then is add 17 red, shuffle up and play. There you have it. So I ended up building basically a mono red deck with Stormbreath Dragon and Phosphorus God of the Forge as my 2 bombs. Okay, thanks for watching.